No, we're going to keep going because the show today is about how do you become more charming. I won't let you know. We're laughing from the break, but Debbie, good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Well, that's good.
And I love that we're opening this way because one of the tips for becoming more charming is opening with a playful tone.
Oh, okay. All right.
Actually, I work a lot with people who are trying to connect to other people. And some of us start off, myself included, super socially awkward. Some people seem to have an innate quality about them where they can connect with people quite easily. I started out as a super shy person, awkward. That's still there sometimes. But I'm also somebody who likes to study and research, and I love to study and research people. So for anyone out there who has a tough time connecting to people, impressing people, charming people, this science may help you. But I will have to say this before we start. I'm going to give you strategies. I'm going to give you cues. I'm going to give you some of the scientific stuff that shows up when you are charming another person. But it's really important to note that a big part of charm is a telepathic thing. We're very intuitive as people, right? So we pick up on the beliefs that someone is holding. That's why your belief about who you are in the world is so important, because it's contagious. You show up with a high belief in yourself and people automatically just give you the benefit of the doubt because your belief is there. It's conveyed, right? So telepathically, there is something that is sort of transferred if you're trying to control or manipulate a situation. So if you're coming in with the goal to charm someone for your own intents and purposes, something about that transfers no matter how many cues you're using, even if you're doing all the right thing, there's something about it that people pick up on that doesn't feel quite right, and they will push away because a big key for charming people is being trustworthy and authentic. So if you're putting off cues whatsoever that you're inauthentic or that you are not to be trusted, people will automatically just kind of put up their guard, and rightfully so. We do pick up on this. We might, placate somebody who shows up that way, but underneath it all, when someone is trying to manipulate situations with their charm and their, we get it, and it's very off-putting for us. Sometimes if you're using humor, because humor is a big charming thing, if you're using it from an intention of humor, like I'm putting on, and you guys know what I'm doing here, that's a very different thing than actually trying to manipulate someone into something when in reality, there is something else going on underneath. We pick up on cues of social rejection, okay? So if I don't like somebody, there are going to be little cues that I'm giving off. If I'm coming to a situation, like I'm really not interested in a person, but I'm going to pretend to be so I can be charming, there are social cues that I will give off, micro expressions, little things that I do with my hands and my body. And when we pick up on cues of social rejection, within 1 second, our field of vision widens. It's a threat to us. So we start to look out for, like, what am I safe here? What's going on with this person, right? So we want to come from an authentic place. And so the first thing to note is when you're coming into an interaction with people, charismatic, charming people are people who are warm and they're competent, they're personable. So really remembering that the person in front of you is important and saying to yourself, I believe that this person is important, this interaction is important. And actually coming from that place will convey telepathically that you're there, and it will signal power, presence, warmth, all of that leads to a feeling of you being charismatic. But when you're coming from a good place, then there are other cues that you may need to know anyway, just because sometimes our social cues can be off-putting to someone by accident or can convey something that we're not intending. So, for example, we've talked before about smiling and nodding. These are open gestures that say, I'm non-threatening, and people like them. Do them too much, though, and they can signal being submissive, right? Or they can signal flirting. So you have to be very, very careful, for example, in professional situations, that you're not, smiling and nodding too much can come across in an unintended manner. Touching is another one. Vanessa Van Edwards, who is my favorite behavioral specialist, she studies human beings. She talks about how, in general, it's good to have a rule of reciprocal touch only, simply because a lot of people have trauma associated with touch. Some people don't like to be hugged. In Louisiana, that's very hard for us. I'm a hugger. I think maybe you are too, right? We naturally want to touch. But when you stay with reciprocal touch, that is the safest way to go. And reciprocal touch means that if the other person gives you bids, so so like maybe a hand hug, you can actually reciprocate by touching that same hand or coming in for your own hand hug and being very respectful. Some cues, though, for some people actually are off-putting, so you have to be very, very careful. This is where understanding the science is really important. Patting is one of those things. So for a lot of people, patting signals that they're the submissive. So you can think about patting a dog or patting a child on the head, like a good little one, right? For some people, that feels really, really off. There are other things that people try to do to connect that actually end up going the opposite direction, right? So if you're just meeting somebody, for example, and you want to create rapport and you want to connect, do not do negging. Negging where you're kind of like, you and your friends do this with each other because you know each other. There's a familiarity. So you kind of like roast each other. You make fun of each other.
We do it all the time.
Yes. Okay. But if you're just coming into an interaction with somebody that you don't know that well and you're trying to establish rapport, negging is not the way to go because you don't know if that's actually going to be offensive. And negging is like, making fun of somebody, kind of putting them down, but in a friendly, joking way. Some people can take that the opposite way of what's intended, and they may not even have that kind of relationship established with their closest people. Like there being maybe nobody in their life that puts them down, so they're not taking it the proper way.
I think our group gets that. We leave it inside the fence.
Exactly. The other thing is, so patting is one, negging is one, guilty laughing is another one that you don't want to do. So a lot of people they'll hear a joke, it's not funny to them, and they will kind of guilty laugh, right? So it comes off as inauthentic, first of all, but it feels kind of gross to you, but it's oftentimes sort of to diffuse the tension, right? But instead of doing that, what Vanessa Van Edwards says is you can do a soft smile and you can just respond instead of like laughing about it when you don't really find it funny. You can just respond about whatever it is that they're laughing on and kind of reroute the conversation so you can stay in an authentic place. All right. So the other thing is that, and this is mostly guys. So if you don't know someone very well, something that guys will do to try to build rapport is to sort of like roughhouse a little bit, like kind of grab them by the shoulders and, kind of choke them sometimes. And that can be very off-putting as well. Some people take well to that, but usually those types of interactions are reserved for actual close friends who interact that way when they're super excited. So if you're trying to establish rapport, that is not the way to go, according to Vanessa.
When somebody shakes my hand, I want a firm handshake.
Yeah.
But I don't want one of those, I'm trying to prove to you how much of a man I am, and I'm going.
That's it.
We pick up on that real quick.
That's exactly right. So what people will actually look at that as a dominance cue, like you're trying to establish dominance, which can be really off-putting. The thing about it is that you want to remember that these are human beings who have, you want to make them feel comfortable, right? We all go into these social interactions. It's kind of high stakes because we're social creatures. We want to be accepted. So the more that you can do to make the person feel comfortable, the better. And you can use the SOFTEN technique, which is something that therapists and psychiatrists actually use. SOFTEN is an acronym, and it stands for smile, and you have open posture, you have forward leaning, taking notes, which obviously in a regular conversation, you're just taking notes mentally, you're not actually taking notes, right? Eye contact and nodding, right? And again, we have to be careful with the nodding because it can be bobbleheading. After a while, it can start to signal submission.
I watch interviewers on TV do that, and they're constantly like, the person could be talking about nothing, and they're like,
yes.
And I've learned over the years, just listen. And if you agree with them, just, or acknowledge them, acknowledge their answer.
Yeah. So the leader.
But don't.
Exactly. It's a submission cue. It really is. If you look and see, more dominant alpha people are not nodding a lot. It's usually the people who are subordinates who are nodding more and smiling more. And that's it's on purpose because it shows reverence and non-threatening behavior and all of that. The other thing to remember is what Hugh Jackman refers to as the 85% rules. Athletes will actually, if you tell them to run at 85% of their fastest speed, will actually end up beating and outperforming their speed if you said to run at 100%. And that's because of relaxation and technique that comes into play with 85%. So sort of softening it for yourself, reframing before going into a social interaction. You know what? I'm here to have fun. I'm going to relax a little bit. It's not that serious of a tone. The more that you can be witty and entertaining and actually come with a lot of energy and positive energy, the more that you're going to find people are really drawn to you, and it becomes a comfortable social interaction. You can kind of navigate around the weirdness.
That's a great point. One of my best coaches told me in track, "Boy, y'all always cutting up and having fun. I expect y'all to do that at the track meet." And we all asked him why. He said, because I want y'all loose for the event.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
And it
right.
works.
So it's like, and ironically, in the tension of really wanting something, being attached to it, there's a fear energy that goes into it.
Right.
It's like, what if I don't, right?
And your muscles cramp.
And
up.
your muscles
Yeah.
cramps. We talked about that with the 4-minute mile too. It's like that feeling of like you're going at excellence, but also with a relaxed state of mind, right? Unattached, but committed.